Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Izzy. Can we talk about our presentation?
Sure.
So, our topic's the bicycle, its history and its effect on society in the Western world. We should start with its invention in the 1800s.
The first bike wasn't very successful, was it? I think the model they called the safety bicycle is more significant.
Yes. Was that named because it was safe for cyclists of all ages, including young kids?
I think it was more to do with the comparison to previous versions, which got their speed from one large wheel. This bike had equally sized wheels, and its speed came from gears. It was an important development, as it was the first model that actually looked like a bike you'd see today.
Right. And the development of that bicycle at the end of the 19th century had an enormous impact on the working classes.
You mean how it gave them freedom to move around and look for jobs? I suppose before the bike, they didn't have private transport, so were limited in where they could work.
Right, because it took such a long time to go anywhere. But I'd really like to draw attention to how inhabitants of rural areas were able to travel outside their communities, and that led them to marrying people they never could have met in the past. That changed society, and I'd like to discuss it in our presentation.
Oh, good idea.
So what should we stress about changing attitudes to bicycles in the 20th century?
Well, the bicycle was an important means of transport through the early 1900s, and that continued until the 1950s, when cars became available to the general population and much more popular. That led to people losing interest in bikes for a while.
I hadn't realised the impact that people's love of motorised transport had on the bike's reputation.
Yes, that's a key point we should make. Then the fold-up bike and others came along in the 60s, which helped sales pick up.
Then things stayed fairly stable until the fitness craze of the 80s piqued interest in mountain biking and sales went up. But the bike had lost its position as a key mode of transport.
Right. I'd like to talk about some current projects around the world involving bikes.
How about the scheme in an American school that provides bikes for all its pupils? I expect the pupils are delighted, not to mention the parents.
I suppose so, although I wonder how much it costs.
Probably not as much as other initiatives. I just wonder if the advantages really justify the scheme.
Well, it must enable pupils to get to school more easily.
But does attendance actually improve? If there's any data to support that, we need to include it, but I haven't found enough.
Let's look into that later.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Could we look at the results of the survey we did with cyclists? We each spoke to different people.
Yes. One of my first interviewees was David. He works from home and spends a lot of time indoors, so at weekends he goes out with a cycling club. He said it's a way to connect with people apart from the other benefits.
Okay. Who else?
I interviewed a woman called Marlene. I asked her what her main reason for using a bike was. She's got young children and doesn't have much free time, so cycling to work is a way for her to keep fit. That's what she likes about it.
Okay. How about Annabelle? Was she the one who sold her car and uses a bike instead? Was that because of pollution?
She did sell her car, but her choice to travel by bike was made for financial reasons, as she was paying so much for petrol.
I see. And Rashid? He was probably the oldest person we spoke to.
He's in his 70s, yes, and he's been cycling around the city for years. He said that there are several advantages, but he really loves the way it helps him think clearly and takes his mind off any worries he has.
Great.
What about you? Have you got notes about Syra?
Yes, I spoke to her last week. She lives in the countryside and she loves being on her bike in the open air and enjoying the beautiful environment and landscape around her.
Right.
The last person I interviewed was Giovanni. He's very practical, and he said it's just easier for him to use a bike to get around town than to drive. He finds sitting in traffic and looking for parking spaces too time-consuming, so he switched to using a bike instead.
Great. Shall we meet next week? And then we can...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture about archaeological research in the Patagonia region of South America. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's archaeology lecture. This afternoon's topic will be the Patagon civilization that flourished at the southern tip of the South American continent around 600 years ago. Now, archaeologists don't know a great deal about the Patagon people. However, they did leave behind one important piece of evidence, a type of coat that was worn over the body for warmth that gives us valuable information about this lost culture. The coat was made from the fur of the guanaco. That's a wild animal like a goat, and it took as many as 13 young guanaco to make a single coat. Young animals were preferred as their skin was soft, which made it easy to work with. For the Patagon men, hunting was a way of life, particularly hunting guanaco. However, once the animals were killed, then different skills were needed, and it was the women who were mostly responsible for the manufacturing process. In particular, it was their ability to sew together many small skins into a coat that made women integral to the process. So, the first thing they did was get the skins ready, and for this they used a special scraper tool. Several examples of the scrapers may still be seen today in various museums in the region. They were constructed from specially sharpened stone, so have survived remarkably well. Once the skins were clean, they were usually decorated, usually done by painting on colours, mostly some combination of red, yellow, and green. The colours themselves occurred naturally in minerals that were dug up from the ground and processed, usually by mixing with water. This basically was the way the Patagon people made coats for, well, over 1,000 years and perhaps longer. But the process changed dramatically after the Spanish arrived in the early 1500s. The coming of the Spanish obviously had numerous impacts on the area. But in terms of coat making, there was one significant development in the hunting technique. Many more guanaco were hunted after the introduction of the horse to the region, which made the Patagon people more mobile. Another important development was that the Spanish themselves were great admirers of the coats and bought them for high prices. So that while in the past guanaco had only been hunted to meet subsistence needs, now the coats were increasingly part of a commercial process. I mean something that could be bought and sold for money. And that meant many more guanaco were hunted as well. Finally, the manufacturing process itself was changed by the arrival of the Spanish. That's because they brought many new materials with them that weren't previously known in the region. Most important for coat making, the old scrapers used for cleaning the skins were replaced with new ones made from glass, and this was more effective and easier to keep sharp. So what conclusions can we draw from Patagon coats? Well, the striking designs that were painted onto many of the more elaborate coats have always fascinated archaeologists. These patterns must have their origins far back in prehistoric times. We are able to say this with some confidence because very similar designs have been found in examples of art painted on the rock walls of caves that have very ancient origins. Did the designs have any significance, or were they merely decorations? The answer isn't clear, but some archaeologists have been prepared to speculate. One possibility is that the designs may have represented a way of connecting with ancestors from previous times, and this is certainly an idea that deserves further investigation. Another interesting speculation concerns the location of large Patagon settlements. Because the natural habitat of the young guanaco was the rich grasslands of inland areas, it seems unlikely that these were constructed around the coast, but rather in parts of the interior. Finally, we should note that the traditional art of coat making has long since been lost in this region. But Patagon shepherds today do still employ some of the same techniques to make blankets in the winter months, though there is no painting or design work involved. Well, that is the end of my lecture, but if you have any questions, please feel free to come.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.